Okay, good morning everyone, and good morning Queensland. We have a lot to get through today, so if everyone can please be patient, and we will be updating you. As you can tell, if you're living in the southeast, there is a lot of rain around. It is non-stop. We do expect it to be easing into Monday, but the Bureau will update you about that. I'm also very pleased to be joined with the Lord Mayor of Brisbane today. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, for coming in to give an update about the situation in Brisbane at the moment. As I said yesterday, we have this big rain event happening right across the southeast. It's filling up all of our catchments, all of our rivers. It's all coming into the Brisbane River, and not only that, we have a lot of rain coming right across the southeast catchment zone into Wivenhoe. So can I just say to everyone from the outset today, if you do not have to be on the roads, please do not be on the roads. We have a lot of water rising right across Brisbane and the southeast at the moment. This rain event is going to move south. It's easing now on the Sunshine Coast and around Gympie, but it's going to be moving south. So there's a lot of water that's coming up quite suddenly. Tragically, there has been some deaths. The Commissioner will outline those, and we extend our condolences to the families. But I don't want to see any more deaths, so please, please, if you do not have to be out today, just stay at home because this water is unrelenting at the moment. So the Bureau will go through the amount of rainfalls we've seen, but just to give you some indication of the Wivenhoe increases, on Thursday it was 58.7%, Friday 80.6, Saturday 142, and today it's 160. So this is a very extreme weather event that we have at the moment. Now we have some issues with the Mount Crosby treatment system. So can I ask people in the southeast to please conserve water at the moment? I know this might sound a bit odd, but until we can get the treatment system back online, and we'll get an update from Graham Frayne shortly, please conserve your water, your drinking water, and we will be updating that as much as we possibly can. In the Brisbane area and Ipswich, the areas that we are getting calls for assistance, so these are the people that need to be very careful about listening if there are any emergency alerts, are around Goodna, Rocklea, Oxley, Auchenflower, St Lucia, Yeronga, Beachmere, Caboolture and Redcliffe. In Gympie, we think we may have reached the peak, but the Mayor says it still might go a little bit higher. That's in excess of 21 metres. Thank you to everyone who evacuated. Everybody is safe in that region at the moment, and it has been declared a disaster declaration area, which means assistance for relief funding will be flowing into those communities. We have around 550 people in the Gympie Evacuation Centre and a total of 1,040 across the state. The system, as I said, is easing on the Sunshine Coast. There are a lot of roads closed. The Bruce Highway is cut. Minister Bailey will outline that in the very near future. Now, Maryborough. We're expecting to see the peak tonight and expecting that to exceed the January event. So the people of Maryborough, they're very resilient people. We had the Mayor, George Seymour, on the phone with our Queensland Disaster Management Group, and we understand that they are very well prepared. Now, we do expect major flooding at Bow Desert that may exceed the bridge on Sunday morning, and major flooding is possible downstream later Sunday. So, of course, this rain event, as I said, is moving south. So we have to all listen to what's going to be happening over the next 24 hours. Now, on the Gold Coast, the weather is moving to the Gold Coast, and we're monitoring the Logan and Albert rivers, and of course there's a lot of there's also some SES calls that have been received from the Gold Coast hinterland areas. Now, for parents who are concerned or thinking about what's happening with schools tomorrow, we'll be providing another update this afternoon. Education is doing a lot of work at the moment. There will be some schools that will be impacted, and of course it may be hard to get to some schools as well. So we'll be giving you more information. Now, our advice is in relation to Brisbane, but the Lord Mayor will go into a little bit more detail. The height that we have seen now, I think we were predicting around 2.6, 2.7, it's now 3.1. We expect that there may be 1,430 homes that will be impacted above the floorboards at this stage. We've also done some releases from the dam. Now, that does take about 24 hours to come down, so that is not impacting at the moment. And with the rain easing, hopefully over the next 24 hours, we then do expect to see high levels of water in our river system for at least the next 3 to 5 days. In relation to community recovery, can I just say that people will be able to get eligibility for $900 for a family of 5 or more, and there is a community recovery hotline, but we'll give that to you later on. So, in terms of the SEQ drinking water supply I mentioned earlier, all Brisbane residents, as well as those in Logan, Ipswich, Moreton Bay and the Lockyer, are being urged to conserve water. So please listen to updates about that, and we'll be giving further information about that during the course of the day. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to the Bureau to say a few words.
Thanks, Premier. Good morning, everyone. The Bureau of Meteorology's severe weather warning for southeast Queensland, as well as areas in northern New South Wales, is current for the dangerous and unfolding weather and flooding situation that we are seeing. Heavy rain is expected to continue throughout Sunday and possibly even in tomorrow. So we have seen a clearance in the northern areas, so Sunshine Coast, Fraser Coast. However, it's worth noting that these areas aren't out of the woods yet. So although they're not seeing that widespread and prolonged rainfall, they could still see showers and thunderstorms today to bring more rainfall. However, there is some relief in those parts. The focus now remains on Brisbane and the Gold Coast and southern areas into northern New South Wales, where we are seeing a lot of widespread rainfall, some really high rainfall totals and some really intense rainfall. And it's that intense rainfall that can lead to flash flooding, especially considering that our rivers and catchments are incredibly saturated, so responding incredibly quickly. We've already seen 70 millimetres fall within an hour at Bribie Island this morning, so that's just one example of how quickly this rainfall is falling and the intensity that can lead to flash flooding, and we are expecting that to continue throughout today and this evening, and we're hoping to see some relief earlier tomorrow. So the relief will come in the early hours of Monday morning, but we can expect to see this rainfall event continue today and well into tonight as well. I'll give a riverine flooding update now. So that was the update for the flash flooding, but we're also expecting a lot of activity in our rivers and catchments. I'll start with Brisbane. So we are continuing to update the Brisbane area. So at the moment our warning has the moderate flood level. However, this is a very evolving situation and we really want people to stay on top of what those warnings are saying. We will be issuing updates today at 10 a.m. We've issued one at 10 a.m. 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. will be the next 3 issues for the Brisbane city. While we are expecting moderate flooding, as I said, it is an evolving situation and many things will contribute to the peaks that we see at the Brisbane River. That's the observed rainfall, what rainfall we see today, and also what happens with the dams. So really reinforcing that we want people to stay on top of those warnings and flood levels. Moving on to the Bremer River at Ipswich. This is forecast to be major. And to put that into context, what we're expecting, we won't see levels that we saw in 2011, but it will be similar to what we saw in Oswald in 2013. So for communities in Ipswich, that's what they can expect today. The Sunshine Coast rivers, so that includes the Maroochy River, the Mooloolah River and the Noosa River. So while the majority of that rainfall has moved south, we are still seeing rivers peak in that area. So we're not seeing rivers in that area similar to the last major flooding, which was that 1992 level, but we are seeing moderate to major flooding there. Moving on to the Mary River, so at Gympie we have seen some peaks this morning, and although it looks like the levels are moving down, there could still be more upstream water, so we're not confirming yet that we have absolutely seen that peak. So we've seen 22.8, so around 23 metres this morning. So to put that into context, that is 1 metre higher than what we saw in 1999. So that places this as the most significant event we've seen there since 1893. While it won't exceed the 1893 level, which was 25 metres, it's still a very significant event and the most significant we've seen in over a century. And then finally, we also have the Logan River, so that's major flooding possible along the Logan River. So we're not going to see totals as big as what we saw in Debbie in 2017, but we are expecting major flooding at Bow Desert. We also have a multitude of other warnings out that I won't include in this summary. So the key message from the Bureau this morning, today and for the next 24 hours is please keep checking the warnings and get onto the app, onto the website, and just be across exactly what's happening in your area and in your catchment as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to State Disaster Coordinator. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Premier. Good morning. Can I start with the community safety aspect? As you've just heard from the Premier and BOM, this is still a very dangerous situation. We are still seeing significant rainfall right across the southeast corner, and we're seeing significant flooding, including flash flooding, in all of those areas. It is a rapidly changing environment. We are still seeing people getting caught up in this. Commissioner Carroll will talk to you about, we've lost 2 more lives since we last reported, so we're now at 6. And she will also update you on the fact that we are still searching for a missing person we hold great concerns for. Similarly, Commissioner Leach will update you on the number of rescues that we're still having to undertake. For our community, please, we're talking about for the next day or so, please stay safe. If it's flooded, forget it. You do not need to be out in this environment. You do not need to be out going into water. If you don't go near the water and you don't go in the water, people cannot drown. So please, please heed the warnings that we're trying to give to you. On our broader system, we've got 1,040 persons in evacuation centres and places of safety across the southeast corner, and there are 23 centres currently operating. We have around 21,000 customers without power across the whole southeast, and that are primarily in the Gympie, Brisbane and Moreton areas. Since we last reported, we've had 31 emergency alerts, and I'm sure that has gone up in the last hour or so since I was last briefed. And that gives us over 60 campaigns since we started for this event, and nearly 4 million messages that have gone out to our community, which gives you some indication of the magnitude of this response that we've got underway. Can I just focus on Gympie, because that's an area obviously of great concern for us. We have been briefed this morning that it appears that it has reached a peak of around 23 metres and is now declining. But as the Premier indicated, we're watching very closely because there are further falls in that area. That impacts on some over 1,000 people in that area, and that includes 130 businesses and also over 500 dwellings. We won't know the full extent of the impact of this until we're able to get into that area and do the proper assessments as the water starts to go down. Happily, 547 persons as of this morning are in the evacuation centre there, safe and sound and well looked after. We are focusing on resupply, we are focusing on infrastructure, power, water. There are issues with that in that area, and we are working through those to make sure that the community is supported. If I could just focus on Brisbane in particular and reinforce that message I've just said, and I'm sure the Lord Mayor will be able to give some really more details on what's happening in the city. But unfortunately for us this morning, we've seen people still going into areas that are really quite flooded. And indeed, we've had to put messaging out specifically around South Bank. Now, for those that have seen South Bank, there's a lot of water there. It's getting into some buildings, it's getting into various areas, and we're still seeing people go into that area. Don't do that. We will have police officers in the area to make sure that we keep people safe, but the way you can help us is to make sure that you stay away from that. And the message too for our community in Brisbane in particular is that we expect to see more of this over the coming days with high tides in particular. So as the high tides come in, we see inundations start to happen. It is moderate, but it's going to impact on our community. So I'll finish off by saying, if it's flooded, forget it. Please, we want to keep everyone alive. Thank you, Premier.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Sadly, we've had 6 flood-related deaths in the past 5 days in what is a very, very large geographic area, from the Sunshine Coast on the 23rd to Gympie, Stones Corner, Ipswich and last night in Indooroopilly. We still have a missing male person that has fallen into the Brisbane River some 2 days ago from Bulimba. Since the early hours of the 25th until just yesterday afternoon, we've received and responded to some 6,000 calls for service to flood-related matters. And that's from persons in danger, emergency assistance, local flooding and community assistance. This would have substantially increased over the last 24 hours. Specialist water police resources have been deployed to Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, Gympie, Ipswich, and we will continue to deploy those resources and other resources in coming days depending on where the floodwaters are. I want to again reiterate that same message. Please keep away from flooded borders. Stay off the roads unless you have to for some emergency beyond them. We have already lost 6 lives and terribly concerned obviously about the other person that we haven't seen in the last 2 days. It has been mentioned so many times. We are in a very dangerous and life-threatening situation. Life-threatening, the evidence is there. 6 people have already died. Please listen to authorities. And as always, if it's flooded, forget it. Thank you. Commissioner Leach.
Good morning. We know that many of you have been at home for some days now, and if it's safe to do so, we need you to stay there. We don't want you out on the roads at the moment. And particularly, if you're thinking about going to do some sightseeing to look at flooded areas, don't. We need to keep access roads open for residents and first responders. Our crews have received over 5,000 requests for assistance since this event began. And in the last 24 hours, we've received over 850 requests for assistance for the State Emergency Service and 80 requests to the Fire and Rescue Service. We're very busy this morning in areas of inner Brisbane, both north and south of the Brisbane River, and we're keeping a close eye as our call rates start to increase around the Gold Coast, the hinterland and through the Bow Desert and Logan areas. Frustratingly, some people are still driving through floodwaters, and we've seen some vehicles washed off roadways again overnight. As the Commissioner said, if it's flooded, forget it. We don't need you on the roads today if you don't need to be. We have, with our tasking for SES, we do have a backlog of jobs. If you've logged a task with the State Emergency Service, we will get to you. We appreciate your patience, but this is a very busy time. We've logged a number of emergency alerts overnight, as the State Disaster Coordinator said. If you do require State Emergency Service assistance, please dial 132 500. But if you're facing a life-threatening emergency, then please dial 000. The other warning is around the floodwaters themselves. They contain a lot of contaminants. Please don't go into the floodwaters. Steer clear of them if you can. Thank you.
A lot of people are no doubt asking the question about how does this compare to other events that we've seen. Is this like 2011? Is it like 2013? This is a unique event. There is no doubt about that. It is different to 2011. In 2011 we saw the rain had stopped while the river continued to rise. Right now we're seeing rain bucketing down. We have a rain bomb above southeast Queensland and it continues to come down. I can't stress enough, people need to stay at home. People did the right thing during the pandemic, and when there were lockdowns, when people were told to stay at home during the pandemic, they stayed at home. Please, you need to stay at home right now. I know there is a lot of curiosity out there about what is going on. That is natural, but please, curiosity is a killer in these kind of circumstances. Now is not the time for going out and about to see what's going on. And now is not the time for cleaning up yet either. Now is the time to stay safe, to stay at home, to seek shelter, and not to be out and about on the roads. On the way over here this morning, I saw far more people out and about than we saw during pandemic lockdowns. That is not a good sign, and that is not safe. Right now, the priority is keeping people safe, and that means staying at home, staying in safety. What we are seeing in Brisbane unfolding at the moment is a combination of creek flooding, river flooding and overland flow all happening at once. That is a different situation to what we have seen in 2011, and that is exactly why people need to stay safe. At the Brisbane gauge of the river monitoring levels, we're seeing that there was a peak this morning of around 3.1 metres. In 2011, that peak at the same location was 4.46. This has been defined as a moderate flood event, but it is still causing damage in many parts of Brisbane, and that is exactly why people must stay at home. We're in the process of assessing the damage across the city, but we know that we are not out of the woods. As the rain continues, we have at least 24 hours more of danger, and that is something that people need to bear in mind. We had a high tide peak at 7 a.m. or 7:30 this morning. There will be another one at around 7 p.m. tonight. We will see another one at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, and then 8 p.m. tomorrow night. So these are the critical times. These are when we expect to see the water levels highest, and they are definitely not times to be out and about. Brisbane City Council has established an evacuation centre in Chandler at the Sleeman Centre. We are looking now at setting up a second location elsewhere in the city. Our crews are out and about monitoring the situation. We're continuing to provide sandbags free to residents at our depots. I ask people, please be patient. We are working as quickly as possible to get those sandbags filled. We are working all day and all night on that. We also have our SES crews as well out, and they are responding to hundreds of jobs across the city. Obviously, it is difficult for those crews to get around at the moment, and by reducing other unnecessary traffic, we can help those critical workers do their job. I guess my most important message, though, to the people of Brisbane is that the three levels of government are working exceptionally well together. We have been through natural disasters before. Queensland and Brisbane has some of the best disaster management procedures and processes and staff in the world. This is bread and butter for our emergency services, and those frontline people are working, and they are the best in the world. We will get through this, but now is not the time to be out and about, and now is not the time to start cleaning up. Thank you.
Thank you. Graham, on water.
Thank you, Premier. Good morning. As it currently stands at 9 a.m. this morning, the current level of the South East Queensland water grid stands at 98%. This is an increase of approximately 10% in the last 24 hours, and in a similar context to the figures that the Premier mentioned for Wivenhoe, up from 71.6% on Thursday. Heavy rainfall, as you've heard from the Bureau, continues to fall in the Somerset and Wivenhoe Dam catchments over the last 24 hours. And as such, we have, as we've discussed yesterday, started flood releases from Wivenhoe Dam at approximately 4 o'clock this morning. Wivenhoe Dam is currently, as at 9:30 a.m. this morning, at 160% capacity. And as discussed yesterday, this is a combination of both the water supply level of about that 1.16 million megalitres and the flood storage capacity of 2 million megalitres. Now, currently, what that figure of 160% represents is that we have 40% approximately of the flood storage being utilised. And this is why, in terms of managing that, those releases, those controlled releases, have been released from 4 o'clock this morning, and they are ongoing at this point in time. And the other thing for citizens to remember is when that water is released, it takes somewhere between 16 to 24 hours, depending on what part of Brisbane you are in, for the water to come downstream. Seqwater continues to work closely with the Bureau and also with local governments to monitor exactly how that flow release will roll out over time, and will continue to adjust that to suit. If I turn to a couple of the other dams, as mentioned, Somerset Dam is at 153% as at 9:30 today, and gated releases continue from there into Wivenhoe, and that is part of that management of the Wivenhoe storage. North Pine Dam is at 74.8% as at 8:30, and gated releases continue in that space as well. And in fact, across all of southeast Queensland, as a result of the rain that we have been receiving, about 20 ungated dams are also spilling and operating as per their expectations. The Premier mentioned the SEQ drinking water supply, and I'd just like to reiterate a couple of points around that. If Brisbane residents around the city, as far out as Logan, Ipswich, Moreton Bay and Lockyer Valley, could please conserve water at this point. The weather has had an impact in particular on the Mount Crosby water treatment plant, and this is happening because of the extreme cloudiness that happens in the water when the water gets stirred up from all the detritus and other matters that come through into the water treatment plant and start to affect the filters. SEQ water crew have been out there working on site and are working assiduously to get a solution and to get elements of the water treatment plant back online. In the meantime, we're using other methods around the network to supplement the water supply, but it will be really important while this is happening if people from these areas I've mentioned can conserve water. Thank you.
Minister Bailey, transport update.
Yeah, thanks very much, Premier. So overnight we've seen increased impacts on our road networks across southeast Queensland. So we've seen some major roads be cut in Brisbane, like Ipswich Motorway at Rocklea, Moggle Road at Kenmore and others. What we need, and also increasing the local road networks, have seen localised flooding. So I do re-emphasise that message. If you don't need to be out, don't be out, because there's a lot of roads cut that won't be logged, and there is danger out there. What we're seeing is the system start to move south gradually, so we're seeing increased impacts in the Gold Coast hinterland and also increasingly in the Bow Desert, Beenleigh areas. There's a lot of roads around there that are now cut, and we'll see those areas increasingly have the sort of impacts we've been seeing in other parts of southeast Queensland. So I urge people in those areas to zone in terms of the information, and if you don't need to move around, please don't. So in terms of public transport, we're seeing increasing impacts there. Just this morning we've seen the Shorncliffe line go down, as well as the Ferny Grove line to Mitchelton. So there will be, where possible, bus replacements there, but again, because of sometimes local flooding, those services will sometimes struggle as well. So we're seeing an overall impact on the rail network of 60 minutes across the whole network for the parts of the network that are actually running. And I know that bus services are having to be rescheduled, diverted, those sorts of things in that Brisbane area. So, it's important to be forearmed when you go out. So if you do have to go out to get to your job, to do something essential, QLD Traffic app or QLD Traffic website will give you the information that we have. But of course, with localised flooding and flows, there will still be local flooding that won't be logged. So you've got to be aware of that. Make sure you drive safely out there, giving yourself a little bit of extra capacity so that if you come over that hill and you see that flooding, you've got time to stop, not go through it. We don't want any further deaths in terms of people driving through floodwaters. There have been 6 tragedies, and there is still a lot of danger right across southeast Queensland, and increasingly as the weather goes south in those sort of Bow Desert, Logan, Beenleigh, Gold Coast sort of areas. Thank you.
Thanks. We're happy to answer some quick questions.
Premier, the mood certainly has changed from yesterday. We're a little calmer.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put it to, throughout the rolling coverage, whether it's been on radio, TV, a lot of people's sentiments in Brisbane at the moment is mixed messaging. And what I mean by that, Premier, is that we see tweets by Brisbane City Council saying that the inundation of water coming from the overflow at Wivenhoe will affect the high tide. Minister Bailey came on radio last night, was very clear that that won't happen. The Lord Mayor is saying something different.
people in Queensland want us all to be united at the moment
Yeah.
and have one message.
And
Premier,
we
I know
are.
that we haven't heard from you since yesterday. I know it's been very busy. Where are we at? What's the feeling? And
Yeah.
are we all on the same page?
Yeah, we absolutely are, and that's one of the reasons I invited the Lord Mayor here as well. We have a great working relationship, and our Queensland Disaster Management Group is world class, and we are getting as much information out to people as possible, and we want the clearest communication. The issue is, it is just a rapidly unfolding event. There is just so much rain. I thought the Lord Mayor explained it incredibly well. There is a rain bomb that is just sitting over the entire southeast. And as I said yesterday, we're used to, in southeast Queensland, experiencing a bit of rain over a certain catchment, a little rain over Noosa or maybe Maryborough or the Gold Coast. This is happening right across the southeast, and it is constant. And as I said the other day, we thought it was going to ease up. Now it hasn't eased up. It is now going to be with us for another 24 hours. Now what we've seen is those extraordinary levels of water going into our SEQ grid, but also into Wivenhoe as well. So people will remember that we had an inquiry following the 2011 floods. The dam manuals have been updated, and I have been absolutely assured that those dam manuals are being followed, and that means controlled releases. That is safety for SEQ residents. Now, because we've had so much water, our treatment plants have had an impact because there's a lot of debris that's flowing into those treatment plants, and they will be fixed as quickly as possible. So we're asking people to please conserve water. Also too, the Brisbane City Council said that they were expecting the flood levels to be about 2.7, and today they're 3.1. That was unexpected, and that was not foreseeable. We have had just so much rain in the catchment area. Now, you've heard from the police, if it's flooded, forget it. There is a lot of rain out there. Our creeks and rivers are saturated, and they are all pouring into our major river system. Now, Brisbane and Ipswich are based on the river, but it is swelling, and we want people to be safe. So please, no sightseeing. Please stay at home. And thank you. People did stay at home during COVID and when we had those lockdowns. But today it is a high-risk situation for people to be on the roads.
Sorry, the river hit 3.1 this morning. The Lord Mayor said it was 4.46 in 2011.
Correct.
And that high tide comes tonight. Where do you expect the?
I might get water to Graham to expand a little bit more on that. But we are giving very clear. There's another meeting this afternoon. We've already had meetings throughout the night, and again at 7:30 this morning before our 9 o'clock meeting. We had the mayors from SEQ also join our 9 o'clock meeting, and they're able to give us up-to-date information about what's happening around the southeast. So I might just hand over to the Bureau to talk about what they're expecting with the high tide tonight. But can I thank residents and the community for doing the right thing. And like I said, I think everyone would be in the same situation as me. We haven't really experienced this much rain in such a short period of time before. It is literally a rain bomb sitting over the entire SEQ. People would have seen that in Townsville when we had the monsoonal issues up there, but that was over an extended period of time. This is happening over a much shorter, condensed period of time, and it's almost as if it's comparable to Cyclone Debbie. People can remember how much rain there was during that particular period. But
just quickly, I just wanted, while we're talking about the dams,
yes.
When we talk about, and Lydia raised the point about the high tide tonight, with
yes.
these controlled releases,
yes.
what we took out of 2011 was obviously that we had that flood storage, and it's only at that 40% mark now. Is it a call of yours, Premier, to say, you know, we need to start releasing a little bit more? Like, if it's at 40% the flood storage...
No, there are manuals, and they are operated by SEQ Water, and they have learnt from 2011, but this is not the same situation as 2011. So I might just get the Bureau to talk about the high tides, and I'll ask Graham to come in and talk a little bit more about how it differs from 2011. It's a completely different circumstance. It's basically a rain bomb sitting over SEQ. We expect it to be moving south over the next 24 hours, but completely unforeseen that it
We
would
had a lot
stay
more
here
rain
so
in
long.
2011, didn't we, in the lead
Over a long period of time where there was a lot of saturation, plus unfortunately we had the Toowoomba event which came down to Grantham. Yeah. Thanks. Lauren.
So I guess just to comment on what we're expecting at Brisbane River. So a lot of what we will see over the next 24 hours will depend where we see that intense rainfall. So we have this very widespread area of rain. However, within that, we're seeing very intense pockets, and exactly where those intense pockets fall is something that we cannot predict, and it's something that will lead to that river rise. So we can give those general predictions and put those into our flooding models and give our most likely outcome, and that's what we're doing. But in terms of exact numbers and peaks, that will absolutely depend on where we see these pockets of rain across the southeast Queensland. So just a note on the high tide, that's actually occurring in the morning. So this morning that was around 7:30, and we are seeing the Brisbane River can be quite dependent on the tide. So we are seeing small peaks at high tide, and that will occur again tomorrow morning and again the morning after, so that will be Tuesday morning.
And when do you expect that to reach, to hit?
Its peak.
Yeah.
So in terms of when we will see the peak, again, that's something that will rely very heavily on the forecast rainfall, so what we see in the next 24 hours and exactly how much we see, and as well as what we do with the dam strategy. So at this stage, what we can say is that there is a moderate level on the flood warning. This is absolutely evolving, so we want people to know that there is absolutely the possibility it can get to major, but what we can't say is exactly the peak and exactly when that will be.
When did we know it was coming? When did we know?
4.46, sorry? Is it possible that it could reach that 4.46 again?
Again, I'm not going to comment on specific numbers. We'll just keep to the moderate to major classifications.
When did we know this event was coming, though? I mean, we've been caught off guard here. When did we know that it was coming? Like, we knew that there was an event sitting there. Should warnings have gone out earlier, or like, how long have we known this was sitting here?
I can't comment specifically on exactly when. This, like I keep saying, this has been a very evolving situation. And the Bureau of Meteorology has been briefing councils and various local disaster management groups for days now. So we've been doing dozens of briefings for the past four or 5 days. So we have had that warning in terms of absolutely this event is coming. And then in terms of how that evolves every 24 hours when we do get more detail, that's when we've been updating the disaster management groups as well as the community. And these events can be notoriously difficult to predict out to 4 days. That's quite a long forecast period. So as we shore up within the 24-hour period, we're getting more and more certain around those peaks. And just to emphasise too with these events, it is that widespread area and then those pockets of intensity, and that's driven so much of the flood peak and so much of where we're seeing flash flooding. And that is something that the models, the forecasts are at that level of detail. So it's the broad scale, we're seeing this event within 24 hours, 48 hours, what exactly does that mean for specific areas of southeast Queensland?
So can you just confirm this morning at about 7:30 was when we hit the high tide in Brisbane, and it would be tomorrow morning then that we're going to expect that second high tide when potentially all this extended rainfall is also going to kind of combine with that?
Correct, absolutely. So we'll see peaks at the high tide, but we may see very intense rainfall just upriver, and that could send further peaks. So I don't want people to have a false sense of security that it's only going to peak in the morning, because it could peak overnight, for example, if we do see those intense pockets. But we can say with some certainty that on the high tide early in the morning, we can see the rises in the river.
Lord Mayor, can I just ask, and I know that the Bureau is doing their best, they can't take these political questions.
Yep.
But when did we know, and how come we're not getting these messages? And I know I'll play the bad guy here, but why aren't we getting these messages? Why is it that there's been a lot of Queenslanders caught off guard? How come we're driving in today, Milton Road's underwater? How come there's people being killed in Indooroopilly, in a leafy suburb? How come we weren't warned to take our things, to put them into higher ground? Places like Kenmore, Sitting Ducks, are all still just saying, stay at home. What are we doing here? Are we packing up? Are we moving to higher ground? Are we evacuating? Or are we staying at home like we did in the pandemic and waiting for the floodwaters to rise, so then that Katarina Carroll and the then the Queensland Police are all having to rescue us. What are we doing? We're not getting a clear message. Can you see what I'm saying? Like, we're sitting ducks.
Well, what I can say is what some people are seeing as conflicting information is simply a rapidly changing situation. Information that is 1 hour old is out of date. Things change on an hourly basis. So, of course, information that was released yesterday, today, is going to be out of date. But we have a responsibility to give people the best information that we've got at the time. Is it perfect? Not always.
But an hour is not enough,
it's important.
An hour is not enough. If the Bureau of Meteorology has just said they've known for days, an hour is not enough time for these people. We need a... So, in a low-lying area, and Milton Road, to see Milton Tennis Centre underwater, anyone that's lived in Brisbane knows what sort of serious situation we're in. People of Auckland were saying what might happen. Should they be packing up? Should they say, hey, if you've got a relative that lives on a hill, we know we don't want people driving around, but should we be going?
Well, this is the thing. The Brisbane community has seen this before. They know where the levels will rise. They've seen it in the past. They know which creeks in their local area will come up. They've also had access since 2011 to all of the flood modelling for their particular area and property. That's been available for years and years. And any time someone buys a house in Brisbane, they get access to that modelling. It's available free on the council website and has been for years. So the modelling is there about each individual's flood risk in their property. And what we're seeing here is a rapidly evolving situation. So we are working really well together at the 3 levels of government. This situation will continue to evolve, and information from yesterday is out of date, and we'll continue to provide the most up-to-date information. That is the best thing we can do. I remember in 2011, at the time, the Lord Mayor at the time was accused of scaring people by suggesting that the situation was going to be dire. History shows that it was right to get those messages out. In the end, we have evolving situations. We've got to warn people with the most up-to-date information we have, but that will continue to change. What we've seen is an evolving situation with dam levels. On Friday night, we were advised that there could be a dam release of up to 6 hours long. We did some modelling based on that. What actually happened was there was a dam release of 1 hour. So that changed the situation. So this will continue to change, but there is no disagreement between the 3 levels of government here. What we have is an evolving situation.
What's your message to reassuring these Brisbane people that are waking up this morning their homes are flooded?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we were advised the other day, we expected the system to be moving. It hasn't moved. We don't control nature. Let me also say, we don't control cyclones. When Cyclone Debbie crossed the coast, we didn't know it was going to come all the way down to the southeast, go into northern New South Wales and end up in New Zealand. These are events beyond our control. But as information comes to hand, we get that information out. And let me be very clear, the Lord Mayor and I are working very closely together. The Gympie Mayor and I are working very closely together. The Sunshine Coast Mayor spoke to us on the phone this morning as well. All of the mayors are invited to these Queensland Disaster Management Committees. So we are keeping the public involved as much as we can. Now let me also say this. Did anyone ever expect that on Friday, Wivenhoe would be at 80% and that today it would be at 160? No one expected that. We don't control nature, but we have to respond in the most measured and responsible way that we can. And that is exactly what we are doing. Now, there's a lot more work that needs to happen now, so I'm going to end by letting Graham give that information about SEQ water, and then we do have a lot of work to do, and we'll be back this afternoon to do a further update for the community.
Just a quick question from me. You and the Lord Mayor have both said that this situation is different to the 2011 floods. Is that because, and you said that it's because there's more rain in a shorter period of time, is that making the situation more acute?
It's right across the southeast, and it's in all of the rivers and the catchments, and it's all just flowing into the rivers.
So it could be worse?
Well, we don't know. We don't expect it. The Bureau is telling us it's not going to be, but we have to get the advice from the Bureau. I'm not the Bureau of Meteorology, so I'll take the expert advice from the Bureau and all of the councils, and earlier to your point, all of the councils have their local disaster management groups, and they have been standing up for days and they have been working with all of their hydrologists and also picking up all of the river catchment rises, and then that feeds into their flood plans. So the other day, when we got the flood plan for Gympie that came into us, we evacuated that area. So we are keeping a very close eye on what is happening across the southeast. But we will listen to that expert advice. Now, Queensland, we listened to the expert advice when it came to the pandemic, and now we have to listen to the expert advice when it comes to the management of the dam, but also to the advice that's coming from the Bureau. And, the Bureau, I believe, is trying to do the best it possibly can. I'll let Graham finish, and then we really have to go and get further briefings. I think people can appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Graham.
Graham, can we put this context around the question that we put to the Premier, and that was around that 40%. I think a lot of people in Brisbane are confused at the moment about Wivenhoe, as the Premier touched on, and it's difficult for people to comprehend. But you can't help but feel people are starting to think about 2011 again.
Yep.
So can we put some context around that 40% and how significant the releases are?
Yes, certainly, and thank you for the question. And what I would say in the context of 2011 is it was a different context. So for those that were in South East Queensland at the time, they will remember that there was a high level of saturation in the ground from a long, wet autumn period and a long, wet winter period that year. Wivenhoe itself was at a much higher level at that time. And the thing to remember about Wivenhoe, and this is part of the work that has happened around the manuals since 2011, is Wivenhoe's status as a flood mitigation dam. And so for the discussions we have at these sorts of briefings, that mention I made earlier of the 1.165 million megalitres, which represents the drinking supply space, and what you'll see in sort of measurements around when that's reached 100%, there is that flood mitigation capacity that sits over and above that, around the 2 million megalitres, and that's the reference to the 40%. So that's probably the first point there. The second point around the manuals, and finally, the other element I would say in regards to Wivenhoe, and to reiterate a couple of other points made by the Premier and the Lord Mayor, is about the work that does happen in understanding the program of releases from Wivenhoe between Secwater, between local governments and between the Bureau. And that is why these programs do alter and change over time, and in terms of what citizens of South East Queensland can do, there is the emergency alert response system that we have that does provide messages from government out to its citizens on a regular basis.
Are you worried about the releases? Is it something that's worrying you?
Well, we are monitoring the releases on a regular basis as the weather adapts, and as the Premier has said, as the weather has stuck around over time. So we continue to monitor and we remain vigilant.
Thanks, everyone.